Hello, YouTubers and Cinephiles. Welcome back to another edition of Nerd with Me. I'm John Ricky. Today is a special review. This film, in my eyes, in my opinion, is probably the top three. It's in the top three gangster films of all time. I mean, there's The Godfather, Goodfellas, and this film. It's a little film you might have heard of, maybe you haven't, but if you haven't, gotta see it. It's a film called Scarface, 1983, starring Al Pacino as Tony Montana, aka Scarface. Now, why is this one of the top three? I mean, Goodfellas is a classic. Godfather is the epitome of gangster epic films. And Scarface, you can say it was like the hyper realistic, hyper violent, and just gave no fucks. It was the most ultra violent of the three. Actually, it's probably the most culturally relevant because there's so many references in Scarface that are used today, be it for like stating your ambition or just everyday sayings that you don't really think come from this film, and then you watch it, you're like, wow, I say that all the time. I didn't know I was inspired by this. It's still referenced today. It single-handedly was the inspiration for the Tupacs, the Biggies, the Nas's. I mean, come on, Nas has a song called "The World Is Yours." Literally, is one of the sayings in this film. Almost everything that you see today, the In Excess, everything that's like culturally relevant today, you can almost really just springboard it back to this film. It's crazy, especially that it's a cultural reference of the 80s itself. You know, there's so much, everything's so bright and colorful, everything is so in your face, and of course, what it's about, I mean, the cocaine trade, especially in the 80s, I mean, everyone was doing cocaine. They even say, like, where this film takes place, which is Miami, you can almost say that cocaine single-handedly brought Miami to where it is now, some might say. So, first things first. For those of you that don't know, Scarface is actually a remake. The 1983 Scarface starring Al Pacino is a remake of the 33 Howard Hawks Scarface, which was about Al Capone, who was the big guy at the time, the big gangster. Everyone knows who Al Capone is. So 50 years later, they want to update it, give it a modern feel. And in the original, they had in like Little Italy, Chicago, I believe. Of course, with this, it was Prohibition at the time. So they decided to update it with the new drug of choice, which happened to be cocaine. It was really popping off now since like the 70s and rolling into the 80s, and it's reaching its zenith. And like the original, they decided to make it what's like the new immigrant story of the time. Now back then, during Prohibition, it was all whatever immigrant you can find, Italian Americans, Polish Americans, what have you. I mean, America was successively growing at an expansive rate. I mean, it's just crazy how many people were coming through. But at the time, it was Cuban Americans trying to escape the whole Fidel Castro, anybody that was just unwanted in his country that he considered unfit, and they were coming to America. It's like, might as well talk about the rags to riches story through their eyes. It's perfect. That's what it is, and it's a great story about trying to come up, even if it's in the darkest recesses of society. So Italian Americans are now Cuban Americans. Now, this iteration is directed by Brian De Palma, who is probably one of the greatest like thriller directors ever. Next to Alfred Hitchcock is the Grandmaster. De Palma's in like the top 5, and this is the film that just put him over the map, made him just the king of thrillers and maybe even gangland, just really put him into the stratosphere. Because up until now, like, he's had a few decent hits. Like, he did his first like big break was Carrie, Stephen King adaptation of Carrie, starring Sissy Spacek. After that, he did Dressed to Kill, which is a nice, good thriller. Blowout, starring John Travolta, which was very intense. And now this. I think his sensibilities with how to build up tension, how to build up suspense really adds to the gangland mentality and just the situations that happens in this film. Because you would figure in a gangster type of lifestyle, who can you trust? You know, just like in like Goodfellas or Godfather, it's like, wow, you really don't know who to trust, and you're just looking over your shoulder the whole way. But the way he builds certain scenes, and you know the scenes if you've seen the film, it works to perfection and really makes you feel for every character. Oliver Stone, who's an amazing filmmaker himself, wrote the script. This guy that made Platoon and JFK and Natural Born Killers, Any Given Sunday. And he wrote this basically fresh off of his Oscar win for writing Midnight Express. So it's already in good hands. You can tell where his inspiration is coming from because supposedly he was writing this during intense cocaine addiction. And how much coke they do in this movie, it's like, okay, you can understand where his head was at. And the cast that brings this masterpiece to life, my God, when you think about it, it's like a who's who. These are like the gold standards of today. You know, you got Al Pacino as Tony Montana, aka Scarface. You have Michelle Pfeiffer in one of her first like meatiest roles at the time as Elvira's love interest. You have F. Murray Abraham, who won an Oscar for Best Actor the same year this film came out for Amadeus. I mean, that dude's a classic actor and he's great. And Stephen Bauer as Manny, he is incredible. You love this guy. He's basically kind of the heart of the movie, so to speak. They make these characters timeless. Whenever you actually think about these characters, and if you actually met them in real life, you'd be like, these people are a whole bunch of selfish asshole, degenerate, and murderous that you would never associate with, but they make them endearing. You can commiserate with them, you can feel for them, and it's all due to who they have in these parts. Yes, it's sometimes over the top, but you know what, it's an acceptable over the topness and very machismo of the 80s, you know, to an nth degree. But hey, that was the time. Al Pacino, I mean, my God, what else can you say about Al Pacino? That guy is a class actor. He's a classic actor, and this just shows it. This is what he said. This is one of his favorite characters that he's ever played, and it shows. He's just eating up the dialogue and just becoming this Cuban American. The guy is Italian through and through, and he's playing a Cuban American. I forgot that he was Italian. I mean, he's amazing as Tony Montana. Amazingly macho. He just is. You don't see him, you see Tony. And Tony's basically a dog without a leash. I mean, he put his mind to something and will not bite down on it and will never let it go. And what is his chew toy of choice? Ambition, get the money, be king of the world. He literally says, the world is mine. And he goes after it, no holds barred, to his own fault. And that's what's amazing about this film, is that it's hyper reality, but yet it's realistic at the same time. It brings it down at the end, brings down the hammer. Every action has a reaction, and there's barely any loose ends that I can even see. But you know what I think a lot of people don't see? If you haven't seen it, check it out. But if you have seen it, I believe when Oliver Stone was writing this in his cocaine binge, I think one of his inspirations was Shakespeare, and one of Shakespeare's darkest works called Macbeth. Because really, think about it. I look at this, and this is the gangland version of Macbeth in the 80s, and it works perfectly. I mean, because in Shakespeare, you follow Macbeth, who's a Scottish lord, and he wants to be king. He has that ambition. He wants it, no holds barred, right? What does he do? He kills the king. Tony Montana, he comes over on the boat. He wants to own the world. He wants to be king of whatever he's going to do. It's gangland. And he beats the king, gets in with him, and then he wants to be him, obviously. He wants everything. Macbeth does the same thing, but in the end, him doing so, his ambition brings his fall. So, aka, that's your classic Greek tragedy, or your Shakespearean tragedy, your Romeo and Juliet, your Macbeths, what have you, Julius Caesar. And that's what Scarface is. Scarface follows those points where it comes to the end, he bites off more than he can chew. Tony Montana, aka Scarface, he bites off more than he can chew. Even though he believes he can take this, it's mine, whatever. But real life knocks on the door, knocks him down a peg or two, and that's putting it mildly. All in all, folks, this film, Scarface, 1983, it's an amazing classic masterpiece. It's taut, it's suspenseful, it is dramatic, it is awe-inspiring. It's actually inspirational in a dark way, because a lot of the themes that happen, they're doing it by the darkest means possible. But you can also apply that to life. The world is mine. I'ma get it. Ambition. Go get it any way you can. And that's the beauty of it. That's why I think it has inspired a whole generation, if not two. Actually, probably even more than that, because if you've played Grand Theft Auto, there's so many references to Scarface in that game series. Regardless, I mean, it's just like that whole game series would not be alive if it wasn't for this film. But anyway, if you haven't seen Scarface, I recommend you just go out and buy it. Don't rent it, just buy it. You'll not be disappointed. And if you have, hey, check it out again for the 100th time. It's a beautiful classic film that I think is even more culturally significant than Goodfellas or Godfather. Like, just on a basic level. I mean, it's incredible and timeless. So anyway, hey, what do you guys think? Comment, share, subscribe, and thanks for listening to me, YouTubers and Cinephiles. Catch you later.